Commander Velthon's towering frame cast long shadows across the briefing room as his four golden eyes swept over the nervous faces before him. The research vessel Astral Dawn housed the galaxy's most experienced xenobiologists, diplomats, and security personnel. Yet today they all looked like scared children. The holographic projector hummed to life, filling the room with flickering images that made everyone lean back in their seats. The first video showed a battlefield somewhere in the Outer Rim. Smoke rose from burning structures, while small bipedal figures moved through the chaos with deadly precision. These creatures, called humans, moved unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Where most species relied on advanced technology, or natural advantages like claws and armor, humans used simple metal tools with terrifying effectiveness. Their weapons looked primitive, almost laughable compared to plasma rifles and energy shields, yet the footage showed them cutting through supposedly superior forces like a hot blade through ice. Dr. Nixara, the ship's lead xenobiologist, found herself gripping her chair's armrests until her knuckles turned pale. Her extensive database contained information on over 3,000 species, but nothing had prepared her for what she was seeing. The humans in the recordings moved with a fluid violence that seemed almost choreographed. They worked together without apparent communication, anticipating each other's actions in ways that suggested either telepathic abilities or years of coordinated training. The second video was worse. It showed the aftermath of what the Council called the Kepler incident. 3 separate first contact teams had approached a human settlement with standard peaceful protocols. The recordings from their final moments were fragmented and chaotic, but the message was clear. These humans had attacked without provocation, without warning, without any attempt at communication. The diplomatic vessels had been torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their shields. Security Officer Coltan's insectoid features betrayed his excitement as his mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that indicated anticipation. His species, the Thrix, were natural warriors who respected strength above all else. To him, these humans represented the ultimate challenge. Here was a species that had somehow evolved on a single planet, yet developed combat capabilities that rivaled civilizations with thousands of years of military advancement. The tactical implications fascinated him, even as the strategic reality terrified everyone else in the room. Commander Velthon paused the recordings and activated the stellar chart. A small yellow star appeared in the center of the room, surrounded by several planets. The third planet from the star glowed with an ominous red designation. "This is Sol 3, also called Earth by its inhabitants," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Our long-range sensors detect massive electromagnetic activity, suggesting an industrial civilization with global communications networks. Population estimates range from 6 to 8 billion individuals, all apparently belonging to the same species." The implications of those numbers hit the room like a physical blow. Most species rarely exceeded a few million individuals across multiple worlds. The idea of billions of these dangerous creatures concentrated on a single planet was almost incomprehensible. Dr. Nixara ran quick calculations in her head and felt her stomach drop. If even a small percentage of humans possessed the combat capabilities shown in the recordings, they could theoretically overwhelm most known civilizations through sheer numbers alone. The briefing continued with tactical assessments, sensor readings, and emergency protocols. But the underlying message was crystal clear. They were approaching something unprecedented in galactic history, something that had already proven its willingness and ability to destroy anyone who came too close. The Astral. Dawn shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning from the sudden transition back to normal space. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. Through the main view screen, the Sol system stretched before them like a cosmic minefield, and at its heart sat the third planet, glowing with an intensity that made veteran space travelers nervous. Junior technician Rathic's scaled fingers danced across his console as waves of data flooded in from the long-range sensors. His species, the Kalari, were known throughout the galaxy for their exceptional hearing, but even he had never encountered anything like this. The electromagnetic spectrum around Earth was absolutely chaotic, filled with thousands of different signals broadcasting simultaneously across multiple frequencies. Radio waves, television transmissions, satellite communications, and dozens of other signal types created a cacophony that would have driven most species insane. "Commander," Rathik called out, his voice trembling slightly, "the signal density is unlike anything in our databases. These humans are broadcasting constantly, on every available frequency. It's like they're trying to communicate with everyone in the galaxy at once." His instruments showed patterns that suggested coordination on a planetary scale, something that should have been impossible for a single-world species. Dr. Nixara leaned over her own scanner, studying the planet's surface through high-powered telescopes. What she saw made her blood run cold. Massive geometric patterns covered entire continents, clearly artificial structures that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Cities blazed with light even on the dark side of the planet, suggesting these humans never slept, never rested, never stopped their relentless activity. But more disturbing were the darker patches scattered across the landscape. "Those formations," she whispered, pointing to circular depressions visible even from their distant position, "they look like impact craters, but they're too uniform, too precisely placed. I think we're looking at weapons testing sites, the Bihor." Implications were staggering. If humans were testing weapons powerful enough to leave marks visible from space, what did that say about their military capabilities? Commander Velthon studied the readings with growing unease. His experience commanding research vessels across dozens of systems had never prepared him for anything like this. Most civilizations showed clear patterns of development, predictable growth from primitive to advanced technology. But Earth defied every model in their computers. The planet showed signs of both incredible advancement and puzzling primitiveness, existing side by side. The orbital space around Earth was cluttered with artificial objects, thousands of them, creating a shell of metal and technology that sparkled in the sunlight. Some appeared to be communication satellites, others looked like observation platforms, and a few showed energy signatures that suggested they might be weapons. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, with early warning systems that could probably detect approaching ships long before they posed any threat. Security Officer Koltan watched the tactical display with professional interest. His analysis suggested the humans had achieved something remarkable and terrifying. They had weaponized their entire planet without apparently destroying themselves in the process. The energy readings showed nuclear technology, but instead of the usual signs of planetary devastation that marked most species' first encounters with atomic power, Earth showed controlled usage on a massive scale. "Full stealth protocols are now active," announced the ship's AI in its calm, emotionless voice. "All non-essential systems have been powered down. We are running on minimum emissions to avoid detection." The bridge lights dimmed to emergency levels, casting everything in an eerie red glow that seemed appropriate, given their proximity to what the Council had designated as the most dangerous world in known space. The crew settled in for what they hoped would be a brief observation mission, watching from the shadows as an entire planet full of potential predators continued their mysterious activities below. The accident happened so fast that nobody had time to react. One moment, Technician Rathik was quietly monitoring the passive sensors, watching Earth's electromagnetic chatter from what they thought was a safe distance. The next moment, his console exploded in a shower of sparks as a massive power surge ripped through the scanner array. The ship's backup systems kicked in immediately, but the damage was already done. Rathik's normally green scales turned a sickly yellow color as he stared at his readings in complete horror. His clawed hands shook as he tried to shut down the malfunctioning equipment, but it was too late. The scanner had sent out an active ping, a powerful electromagnetic pulse that had shot straight toward Earth like a flare in the darkness. After hours of careful stealth, they had just announced their presence to an entire planet of dangerous predators. "What have you done?" Commander Velthon's voice cut through the bridge like a blade. The massive alien's 4 eyes blazed with fury as alarms began wailing throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed everything in pulsing red, making the bridge look like the inside of a beating heart. The stealth systems that had kept them hidden were now useless. Every human on that planet would know exactly where they were. The response came faster than anyone thought possible. Within 3 minutes of the accidental ping, Earth's orbital sensors had locked onto their position. Within 5 minutes, something was moving. Dr. Nixara watched her long-range scanners in disbelief as a small craft separated from the planet's surface and began accelerating toward them at speeds that should have torn any living creature apart. "Impossible," she whispered, running the calculations again and again. Nothing biological should be able to survive that kind of acceleration. The G-forces alone would liquefy most known species. Yet the human vessel continued to climb, pushing through Earth's atmosphere and into open space with a determination that seemed almost supernatural. The communications array crackled to life, filled with static and interference. Through the noise came a voice distinctly human, speaking in rapid bursts of what their translator identified as the dominant Earth language. The voice was high-pitched, definitely female, and carried an intensity that made everyone on the bridge step back from their stations. Dr. Nixara's universal translator worked desperately to process the alien speech patterns. Fragments came through clearly. Unknown vessel sounded like a challenge, a demand for identification. Assistance required was obviously a lie, probably some kind of tactical deception. Most terrifying of all was approaching fast, which could only mean the human was preparing for immediate attack. Security Officer Coltan's mandibles clicked together in rapid succession as he analyzed the approaching craft. It was smaller than their research vessel, but moved with a predatory grace that spoke of advanced engineering and aggressive design. The forward sections of the human ship were beginning to glow with energy buildup, clearly weapon systems charging for combat. The readings showed power levels that seemed impossible for such a small vessel. "She's trying to communicate," Dr. Nixara said, though her voice carried no conviction. The patterns coming through their translator suggested complex speech, but the tone was unmistakably aggressive. Every species they had ever encountered used similar vocal patterns when preparing for battle. The human pilot was probably coordinating with other vessels, calling for backup, or perhaps issuing some kind of ritual challenge before beginning her attack. Commander Velthon made the only decision that made sense, given their intelligence about human behavior. These creatures were known to attack without warning, to show no mercy to peaceful explorers. The approaching vessel was armed, fast, and piloted by a member of the most dangerous species in known space. There was only one logical response to such a threat. The human vessel moved with a fluid grace that defied everything the aliens knew about spaceflight. As it drew closer to the astral dawn, the crew could finally see their first living human through the reinforced viewports. She was smaller than they had expected, much smaller than the massive warriors from the Council's combat footage. Her form was encased in what looked like sophisticated battle armor, gleaming white with blue markings that probably indicated rank or unit designation. Lieutenant Mira's hands moved rapidly across her control panel as she tried every communication. Protocol in Earth's diplomatic handbook. Her ship, the diplomatic vessel Harmony, had been specifically designed for first contact situations. Every surface was covered with peaceful symbols, mathematical equations, and artistic representations meant to show humanity's desire for friendship with other species. The running lights along her hull flashed in careful patterns that had been developed by Earth's best xenologists as a universal sign of peaceful intent. But the aliens watching from the astral dawn saw something completely different. To them, the flashing lights looked like targeting systems cycling through different modes. The mathematical symbols on the ship's hull appeared to be tactical markings, possibly kill counts or unit identifications. The artistic representations looked like stylized weapons or perhaps religious symbols related to warfare and conquest. Dr. Nixara pressed her face against the viewport, studying the human pilot with scientific fascination mixed with terror. The creature's head was completely enclosed in a reflective helmet that hid its features, making it impossible to read any facial expressions or biological cues. For all they knew, the human could be preparing to activate some kind of psychic attack, or perhaps the helmet contained advanced targeting systems that were already painting their ship for destruction. The human's voice continued to crackle over, their communications array growing more urgent with each transmission. The translator worked overtime, trying to make sense of the rapid speech patterns. Words and phrases came through in fragments. Peaceful intentions. First contact protocol. Request permission to board. But the universal translator, designed for known galactic languages, struggled with human speech patterns and kept producing alarming alternative interpretations. Peaceful intentions could easily mean peace through superior firepower. First, contact protocol might refer to some kind of standard human battle doctrine for dealing with alien encounters. Most disturbing of all, request permission to board sounded exactly like the kind of demand a predator species would make before launching an assault on a weaker vessel. Mira could see the alien ship through her cockpit window, and her heart raced with excitement rather than fear. After decades of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, here was proof that intelligence existed beyond Earth. The vessel was beautiful in its alien design, with flowing curves and organic-looking hull sections that suggested an aesthetic sense completely different from human engineering. She wanted nothing more than to meet these beings, to learn about their culture, to establish the first peaceful relationship between their species. Security Officer Coltan watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The human vessel was maintaining a perfect intercept course despite his ship's attempts to create distance. Its weapons systems were clearly active, energy signatures building toward what looked like an imminent attack. The pilot's aggressive communications suggested she was either calling for reinforcements or perhaps issuing some kind of ultimatum. The decision was made in seconds. Following standard galactic protocol for dealing with hostile vessels, Coltan activated the Astral Dawn's defensive systems and fired a series of warning shots across the human ship's bow. The energy bolts were carefully aimed to miss, intended to demonstrate superior firepower and hopefully convince the aggressive human to withdraw. Instead, the warning shots struck Mira's ship directly, ripping through her hull and causing catastrophic damage to her life support systems. The Harmony spun through space like a wounded bird, its once pristine hull now torn and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Mira fought desperately with her controls as warning lights flashed red across every surface of her cockpit. The alien weapon had punched through her ship's defenses like they were made of paper, tearing massive holes in sections that should have been impenetrable. Her oxygen levels were dropping fast, and she could hear the terrifying whistle of air escaping through cracks in the hull. Despite the chaos around her, Mira never stopped trying to communicate. Her voice filled the radio frequencies as she broadcast on every channel available, switching between languages and even trying basic mathematical sequences. "Please, I'm not hostile," she repeated over and over, though her words were getting weaker as the thin air made it harder to breathe. "I represent Earth's diplomatic corps. I came here to make friends, not enemies." The asteroid field ahead offered her only chance of survival. These floating rocks, scattered throughout the outer edges of the solar system, might provide enough cover to make emergency repairs. Mira's ship lurched violently as she pushed the damaged engines beyond their limits, trying to reach the relative safety of the asteroids before her life support failed completely. On the bridge of the Astral Dawn, the crew watched this deadly chase unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. Dr. Nixara's sensors showed the human's biological readings spiking to dangerous levels. Heart rate elevated far beyond normal parameters, stress hormones flooding her system, adrenaline pumping through her body at concentrations that would kill most species. To the alien scientist, these readings looked exactly like the signs of a predator entering what her people called a berserker rage. "Look at those readings," Dr. Nixara whispered to her colleagues, pointing at the bioscanner display. "Her entire physiology is shifting into combat mode. Even dying, she's preparing to fight." This is exactly what the Council warned us about. The continuous radio transmissions from the human vessel only reinforced their fears. The alien translator kept producing fragments that sounded like battle cries or calls for reinforcement. "Commander," Velthon studied the tactical situation with cold calculation. The human had proven to be exactly as dangerous as the Council's files suggested. Even when mortally wounded, She continued to maneuver with skill that impressed even his experienced crew. Her ship's course toward the asteroid field showed tactical, thinking that would have been admirable in any other species, but terrifying in these Deathworld predators. "Maintain distance," he ordered, his four eyes never leaving the main display. "We need to observe how these creatures behave when cornered. This information could save countless lives in future encounters." The research value of watching a human's final moments was undeniable, even if it felt somewhat ghoulish. Security Officer Coltan's analysis painted an even grimmer picture. The human pilot was leading them toward the asteroid field, possibly hoping to use the rocky debris as cover for an ambush. His species had encountered wounded predators before, and they all knew the same basic rule. Injured animals were often more dangerous than healthy ones. The human's persistence in trying to communicate was probably just another hunting tactic, designed to lure them closer. The Harmony disappeared behind a massive asteroid, its hull scraped and battered but still moving. Mira's radio transmissions continued, though they were getting fainter with each passing minute. The alien crew could track her ship's heat signature as it wound deeper into the asteroid field, but they maintained their distance, unwilling to risk following a desperate human into terrain that clearly favored the hunted over the hunters. What they didn't realize was that every one of Mira's transmissions was a plea for help, not a threat of violence. The Harmony hit the asteroid surface with a grinding crash that sent chunks of rock flying in all directions. The diplomatic vessel, designed for peaceful meetings rather than combat landings, crumpled like paper as it scraped across the barren landscape before finally coming to rest against a massive boulder. Steam and vapor poured from the wreckage as the ship's remaining atmosphere mixed with the cold vacuum of space. Through their long-range scanners, the crew of the Astral Dawn watched in stunned silence as a figure emerged from the twisted metal. Mira crawled out of her ship's emergency hatch, her movements slow and deliberate, despite the obvious pain she was experiencing. Her white diplomatic suit was torn in several places, and dark stains that could only be blood were visible across the fabric. What happened next sent waves of terror through the alien observers. The human began removing her equipment piece by piece, starting with her helmet. To the watching aliens, this looked like a ritualistic preparation for combat. Many warrior species had similar traditions, stripping away unnecessary gear before engaging in final battle. Dr. Nixara's hands trembled as she adjusted her sensors to get a clearer view. Mira's face was finally visible, pale and streaked with blood from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were still alert and determined. She looked up toward the distant alien ship, and even across the vast emptiness of space, her gaze seemed to find them directly. The aliens interpreted her steady stare as a predator sizing up its prey, calculating distances and angles for an attack that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Her outer gear came off next. The bulky life support pack and emergency equipment dropped carelessly onto the asteroid's surface. Security Officer Coltan's mandibles clicked nervously as he watched this display. His species' combat doctrine taught that enemies were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. A warrior who discarded protective equipment was usually preparing for a suicide attack, trading defense for maximum aggression. But what truly terrified the alien crew were Mira's gestures. She raised her arms toward their ship, moving them in complex patterns that looked like some kind of ritual challenge. Her mouth was moving constantly, probably chanting battle hymns or calling upon whatever violent gods her species worshipped. The universal translator caught fragments of sound, but the words made no sense. Please, help, friends, peace. These were probably just more tactical deceptions, designed to confuse enemies before launching an attack. The situation became even more alarming when Mira activated what appeared to be a targeting system. A bright red light began pulsing from a device on her belt, its rhythm matching her heartbeat according to the bioscanners. The pulsing red beacon triggered primal fear responses in several crew members, their evolutionary instincts recognizing the signal of an approaching predator. Doctor. Nixara's readings painted a picture of biological chaos. The human's stress hormones were at levels that should have caused immediate organ failure, yet she remained conscious and active. Her heart rate fluctuated wildly, sometimes racing, sometimes slowing to dangerous levels. Most disturbing of all, Her brain patterns showed the kind of electrical activity associated with berserker rage states in other predator species. "She's preparing for something," Dr. Nixara whispered, her voice barely audible over the bridge's ambient noise. "All these readings suggest a final surge of combat hormones. She's probably gathering strength for one last attack." The idea that a single human, stranded on an asteroid with failing life support, could still pose a threat to their heavily shielded research vessel seemed impossible, but the Council's warnings echoed in everyone's minds. Commander Velthon ordered maximum alert status as they continued to observe the dying human's final preparations for what could only be described as a last stand. Junior researcher Yulden had always been the curious one among the crew, the type who asked questions when others simply followed orders. While his colleagues maintained their fearful distance from the stranded human, something about the situation bothered him. The readings didn't match the stories they'd been told about these death-world predators. Against direct orders, he quietly launched a microprobe from one of the ship's maintenance bays. The tiny device, no larger than a grain of sand, drifted silently through space toward the asteroid where the human had crashed. Its advanced sensors were designed for close-range biological analysis, capable of detecting everything from DNA patterns to emotional states. As it approached the figure sitting alone on the barren rock, Yulden's console filled with data that made no sense according to everything he thought he knew about humans. The human's stress hormones were indeed elevated, but not in the way he expected. These weren't the chemical signatures of rage or aggression that his species associated with combat preparation. Instead, the readings showed something entirely different. The cortisol levels suggested fear, yes, but also sadness, loneliness, and something his scanner identified as hope. How could a predator feel hope while dying alone in space? Yulden watched more carefully as the human moved her arms in those complex patterns that Security Officer Coltan had identified as challenge displays. But the microprobe's detailed analysis revealed something startling. These weren't random aggressive gestures at all. They followed specific patterns, repetitive sequences that suggested structure and meaning. The human was trying to communicate, using her body language, desperately attempting to convey peaceful intentions through movement. The probe's advanced AI worked frantically to decode human emotional frequencies, a task made difficult by the fact that no one had ever studied this species up close before. As the artificial intelligence calibrated its sensors and cross-referenced the biological data, a clearer picture began to emerge. The human's brain patterns showed activity in regions associated with language, creativity, and social bonding, rather than the aggressive sectors that should have been dominant in a warrior preparing for battle. Then came the revelation that changed everything. The microprobe's high-resolution cameras captured something that the long-range sensors had missed entirely. The human's face was wet with tears. She was crying, not from pain or anger, but from something far more profound. The salt water streaming down her cheeks told a story of heartbreak and disappointment that had nothing to do with warfare or violence. Yulden's hands shook as he replayed the human's radio transmissions through the probe's improved translation matrix. With the emotional context now available, the AI could finally interpret the true meaning behind her words. "Please, I'm not hostile," wasn't a tactical deception, but a genuine plea for understanding. "I represent Earth's diplomatic corps" wasn't a threat but an introduction, an attempt to establish her peaceful credentials. "I came here to make friends" was perhaps the most heartbreaking message of all. Every single transmission had been an attempt at communication, a desperate effort to reach out across the vast gulf between species and establish contact. The human had been trying to introduce herself, to explain her mission, to ask for help when her ship was damaged. Her persistence in broadcasting even as her life support failed wasn't the behavior of a predator calling for reinforcements, but of a diplomat refusing to give up on the possibility of peaceful contact. The truth hit Yulden like a physical blow. The human removing her helmet and equipment wasn't a warrior preparing for final battle, but a diplomat removing barriers to communication. She had taken off her helmet so the aliens could see her face, hoping that facial expressions might bridge the gap where words had failed. Her gestures weren't challenges, but attempts at universal sign language, basic concepts like friendship and peace that any intelligent species might recognize. The pulsing red beacon wasn't a targeting system, but a distress signal, a standard, emergency device that any spacefaring civilization would recognize as a call for help. Yulden burst onto the bridge with his datapad clutched in his trembling hands, his normally calm demeanor shattered by what he had discovered. The junior researcher's species rarely showed emotion, but his scaled face was flushed with urgent colors that indicated extreme distress. He rushed toward Commander Velthon's command station, ignoring protocol and rank in his desperation to share the truth. "Commander, you have to listen to me," Yulden gasped, his words tumbling over each other in his haste. "Everything we think we know about humans is wrong. The probe data shows that she's not aggressive at all. She's been trying to talk to us this whole time, trying to make friends, not war." He held up his scanner, showing the detailed biological readings that painted a completely different picture of the dying human. Commander Velthon's 4 eyes fixed on the young researcher with a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. His massive frame towered over Yulden as he spoke in the cold, measured tones of absolute authority. "The Council's intelligence comes from 3 separate contact missions, junior researcher. Are you suggesting that our most experienced diplomats and military analysts were all wrong? That centuries of careful intelligence gathering was somehow mistaken?" The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors tracking the humans' failing life signs. Every eye was on Yulden as he struggled to find words that would convince his superiors. The weight of an entire species' reputation hung in the balance, along with the life of the woman dying alone on the asteroid below. Through the probe's enhanced translation matrix, Mira's voice came through clearer than ever before. Her oxygen was running dangerously low, making each word an effort, but she continued to broadcast her message across all frequencies. "I hope to meet you as friends," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the static. "I'm sorry we got off to such a bad start. Maybe the next humans who find you will have better luck." Dr. Nixara stepped closer to listen, her scientific mind finally beginning to process what she was hearing. The tone wasn't threatening at all. It was sad, disappointed, filled with regret rather than rage. These weren't the words of a warrior, issuing final challenges, but of a diplomat apologizing for a mission that had gone terribly wrong. Yulden played back more of the intercepted transmissions, each one more heartbreaking than the last. "My name is Mira," the human had said during her initial approach. "I'm a diplomatic envoy from the planet Earth. We've been hoping to meet other intelligent species for so long. This is the most exciting day in human history." The words that their original translator had rendered as aggressive demands were actually expressions of joy and wonder. "Look at the brain scans," Yulden pleaded, showing the detailed neural activity maps the probe had captured. "These aren't the patterns of a violent species. The areas lighting up are associated with curiosity, hope, and social bonding. She's been trying to communicate using sign language, mathematical concepts, even artistic expressions. Everything she's done has been an attempt to show peaceful intentions." The terrible truth began to dawn on Dr. Nixara as she studied the data. The previous contact teams hadn't been murdered by bloodthirsty predators. They had died in catastrophic misunderstandings. Humans had probably approached those first meetings with celebration and excitement, just like Mira had today. But the aliens, terrified by council warnings about dangerous deathworlders, had responded with weapons and violence. The humans, confused and frightened by the unexpected attacks, had defended themselves with whatever tools they had available. Their primitive weapons, wielded in desperation and fear, had proven devastatingly effective against alien technology, designed more for exploration than warfare. The contact teams had died not because humans were inherently violent, but because fear and misunderstanding had turned what should have been historic peaceful meetings into tragic battles. Mira's final transmission was growing weaker as her life. Support systems approached complete failure. She was running out of time, and so was their chance to finally get first contact right. The transporter beam sparkled around Yulden as he materialized on the asteroid's barren surface, his emergency. environmental suit protecting him from the harsh vacuum of space. He had never disobeyed a direct order before in his entire career, but watching an innocent being die, while his superiors debated protocols, felt like a betrayal of everything he believed science should represent. The rocky ground crunched under his boots as he made his way toward the crashed human vessel. Mira lay crumpled near her ship's emergency hatch, her face pale blue from oxygen starvation and her lips nearly purple from the cold. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate gasps as her body fought to extract the last traces of breathable air from her failing life support system. Frost was beginning to form on her torn diplomatic uniform, and her movements had slowed to almost nothing. When Yulden's shadow fell across her face, Mira's eyes fluttered open with tremendous effort. For a moment, she stared at the alien figure standing over her, taking in his scaled skin, his elongated limbs, and the strange environmental suit that marked him as clearly not human. Then, impossibly, she smiled. Even dying alone on a frozen rock millions of miles from home, her first reaction to meeting another intelligent being was joy. Yulden knelt beside her, his species' natural empathy overwhelming his scientific training. His people, the Zalani, had evolved a unique form of communication that went beyond words or gestures. They could share thoughts and emotions through direct bioelectric contact, an ability that had made them natural diplomats and counselors throughout the galaxy. Without hesitation, he reached out and placed his gloved hand against Mira's forehead. The moment their bioelectric fields connected, Yulden's world exploded with sensation. Human emotion hit him like a tidal wave, threatening to wash away his own consciousness in its intensity. He experienced Mira's memories of preparing for this mission, her excitement at the possibility of making first contact, her careful study of peaceful greeting protocols from Earth's diplomatic academy. He felt her confusion and terror when the alien ship had opened fire, her desperate attempts to communicate even as her vessel died around her. But what nearly knocked him unconscious was the depth of human capacity for hope and forgiveness. Even now, dying from their attack, Mira felt no hatred toward the aliens who had shot her down. Instead, her mind was filled with sadness for the missed opportunity, worry that future human diplomatic missions might face the same tragic misunderstanding, and an overwhelming desire to somehow bridge the gap between their species before it was too late. The bioelectric connection worked both ways, and Mira suddenly understood everything that had happened from the alien perspective. She saw how the Council's warnings had painted her species as monsters, how every peaceful gesture had been misinterpreted as aggression, how fear and misunderstanding had turned what should have been a celebration into a tragedy. Instead of anger, she felt only compassion for beings who had been so frightened that they couldn't recognize friendship when it was offered. Yulden activated his suit's emergency life support sharing system, creating a breathable atmosphere bubble around both of them. The oxygen flowed into Mira's starving lungs, bringing color back to her cheeks and strength back to her limbs. They sat together on the asteroid's surface, two beings from different worlds sharing breath and understanding in the vast emptiness of space. When the rescue team from the Astral Dawn finally arrived, following Yulden's emergency beacon, they found an impossible scene. The junior researcher was holding the human gently in his arms, both of them alive and breathing. Mira's eyes opened as she was lifted onto the medical transport, and her first words were spoken in carefully practiced galactic standard that she had learned from her diplomatic training. "Thank you for the hug," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with genuine gratitude. The simple phrase, spoken in their own language by someone they had been taught to fear, shattered every preconception. The rescue team had carried about humans,